Thank you, Pete, for that introduction and for those excruciatingly kind words that I barely lived through.
You deserve it, Johnny.
Thanks. Um, so I'm going to share my slides here. Okay, are you seeing the slide that says Grow Boston? Great, perfect. Okay. It's always hard to tell when, especially when I have two screens. Um, so um, first of all, I'll talk a little bit about myself. In a little bit more detail than Pete did. But I wanted to start with this slide because this will give you a sense of the context of my work now, which is running the office, as Pete said, of urban agriculture. And our goal is to increase food production and support local food producers in Boston, including gardeners, farmers, beekeepers, and more. We do have also some more another kind of goal that we established in the process with the Office of Food Justice, and I'll talk a little bit about that collaboration later. Let me see if I can. Okay. So as Pete said, I have been an urban farmer. I was the manager of Revision Urban Farm. I worked there for 6 years, 3 years as the grower and 3 years as the manager. I've been a gardener. Because I've been a gardener for like 27 years now, maybe, but a community gardener for at least 20. So I've been definitely in urban agriculture, either personally or professionally for a while. And I came to Boston, the city of Boston, in 2018 to manage the grassroots program, which is I will get into this in more detail as well, but it's an open space development program that's been around for like 30 years. And then we launched Grow Boston in February of 2022. Just for some context, I don't know how, I didn't have a sense of, I forgot to ask like how much people are already familiar with urban agriculture, but this will give you some sense, and I won't go into everything in great detail of Boston really has a long history of gardening and farming. There have been community gardens since World War II for sure. We just at the Gardeners Gathering this last weekend did a big celebration of the Garden and Farm Act, which was 50 years ago. Sponsored by Mel King, and that made it possible to have gardens, community gardens on public land, and that for free. And so that was though there had already been some community gardens, that really pushed things forward, and a lot of new gardens got built in the 70s and 80s. And then there's been some really, there's like a few urban farms now that have existed since the early 90s, including Revision Urban Farm, the Food Project. There's been really urban farming has been here for a while, but it's definitely expanded in the last like 10 to 15 years. And that's about how long I've been working in this field as well, is over the last, yeah, something like that. So there's been also food forests have been expanding. There's just been a lot of new things happening, and of course rooftop growing, which we'll get into a little more later. Mostly John will cover that. So this grassroots program, as I mentioned, has existed for like 30 years, and it is a federally funded program. It's using community development block grant funds, and we have also we dispose of land for $100 a parcel to create or mostly food producing open spaces, also some passive spaces. But that program, as I said, has been here. It's at the Mayor's Office of Housing, which is also where Grow Boston lives. And it's at the Mayor's Office of Housing because we have the land inventory, the vacant land that the city owns or has acquired through tax foreclosure lives at the Mayor's Office of Housing. So we have that inventory that we work with, and as a department, we are thinking all the time about where can we build housing and where can we create open spaces. Um, so Grow Boston, as I said, it got established in early 2022, and the city was thinking about, basically we didn't have anywhere in the city where support of food production lived. There was I think at the time it was the Office of Food Access. Um, and that like when Grow Boston was conceived of, and that office really was focused more on distribution and emergency food access and those kinds of things, and not on food production. And previous iterations of that office also had not done that much, where they'd done some work on urban agriculture, but not that much. And so there seemed to be a gap because we were doing a very specific kind of work where we were like developing, vacant land into gardens and farms with this one funding source that had a lot of restrictions on it. And it seemed like there could be a lot more that the city could do to support this field that's already thriving and growing and becoming more complex, and that the city could really invest in that and support the success of the field. So we were launched at the same time as the Office of Food Access became the Office of Food Justice, and we do partner with them quite a lot. We've developed some shared, I'm not going to share these today, there's not time for that, but we've developed some shared strategic goals and are working on figuring out how we measure those metrics that we can use to evaluate those goals. The funding that we have from CDBG, we have a little bit more from that, or a little bit, sorry, I'm also getting over cold, so my head's still a little, a little bit foggy. We have city operating funds that just more than match what we had in CDBG funds. So now we have about $1.6 million a year as an office, and we have these other two funding sources for very specific projects, which I'll get into in more detail, including ARPA funding for raised beds and rooftop farms, and $200,000 for a planning process that we're almost done with. So the grassroots open space program, as I mentioned, we sell land for about $100 a parcel. We develop, and this is in low to moderate income communities all over the city. If the site is like within a half mile or quarter mile if the population within a quarter mile or half mile of a site is at least 51% low to moderate income, we can use these funds to build these open spaces. And they are often community gardens or urban farms or food forests. Sometimes they are passive open spaces. And generally, the Parks Department would be in charge of something that is a more traditional park. But we always check in with them if the community really wants to see a small parcel become a passive open space, and the Parks Department doesn't have the capacity to take it on, or it's not seen as a need in their eyes in that neighborhood. We may go ahead and just create it with our funding, and some local organization will take ownership of it. So that program is still our biggest program by far. And there are about um, depending on how you measure the pipeline, I would say like 40 projects in the pipeline across the city that are like potentially going to go through this program. So then we have this 4-year project of getting to build we're probably going to build about 800, maybe a little more, raised beds at residences for low and moderate income, or it's really low income households. We are also funding educational opportunities for those residents, and we're nearing, I think by the end of May, we'll have built the first 300 of those 800. We're also now exploring a new grant. This was funded through the ARPA program, the ARPA funds. We are also looking at, so as we are finishing our planning process, which was funded by USDA, we are looking at further USDA funding to support an urban agriculture ambassador program, and that program will complement these raised bed gardens. And it'll do more. It will do more than that, but that's one key way that we're going to be hopefully supporting these gardeners to keep gardening growing their own food going forward. We also have, as I mentioned, funding to build 2 rooftop farms. It's not quite sufficient to build 2 whole rooftop farms, but we've been able to contribute quite a lot. And I know that John will get into in more detail the BMC rooftop farm, but the second site for BMC on Mass Ave was funded through a combination of these ARPA funds and some city operating money, and maybe other funds. And we are hoping to commit the funds for the second of these 2 sites, these 2 farms, in the next 4 to 5 months. So we're currently exploring possible locations and how we're going to do the procurement and all that. But we think that it may even be less than that, but that's at maximum 4 to 5 months. We want to wrap that up. So that's really exciting, and I'll say a little more about our aspirations around this area later. We've just finished a year-long community engagement process. We focused on primarily Dorchester, Mattapan, Roxbury, and East Boston in terms of resident engagement. We have been also meeting with city agencies whose work touches on urban agriculture, and you may or may not be aware, but urban agriculture is an area that really there were 10 agencies in these 3 meetings that we had and represented, and we declined to include 4 to 6 others. There's like water and sewer, libraries, schools, community centers, assessing. inspectional services. Like there's just many departments who have an influence on or participate in urban agriculture. And so we've been meeting with those folks over as I said, three times over the last like about a year, and we will be continuing those meetings, which is really exciting because we're hoping that we will be able to make urban agriculture of all kinds easier and have even more support coming from the city by being in close communication with these other agencies. And there's been enthusiasm from them as well to like sort of solve some of the problems that urban farmers or community gardens come across. Um, and so I think that as we move forward into possibly expanding rooftop growing and support and are playing a role in that, this will I think come up as well as like where are there difficulties that come up with city processes. Um, Unless rooftop farms are easy breezy, and in which case we don't have to worry about it, which would be great. So the other third component of this urban agriculture strategy was that we had a convening of food producers, about 30 something food producers from across the city came and did a visioning project. And so we're taking all of this. So our partner in this work, we had two partners. One was the Urban Farming Institute, and the other was Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the regional planning agency. And MAPC's final report will be finished in 2 weeks, a week and a half. So we've been working closely with them and reviewing recommendations and already starting to think about how we can implement both what, like the sort of reach towards the vision that food producers came up with and respond to community input as we move forward with our work. So that's very exciting. Some other programs that we have are like, I personally manage a lot of the smaller funding programs that we have. So we have an open space design grant open right now. We will have capacity building open soon. Our education grant just closed on Monday. We had 36 respondents, so that it was like really kind of blew our minds how many organizations are trying to do urban agriculture education. So we're excited to see what, where we can invest in that work. We'll probably do another innovative food production grant, which we did last year as well. And then we also did these mini grants for supplies for gardens and outreach events, and we'll probably do both of those as well this year. So we're trying to really, while trying hard to avoid spreading ourselves too thin, which is hard to avoid, trying to really have as much impact as we can in all areas of this work. There's not, it's not, there's a lot of nonprofits doing this work, and there's not a lot of urban agriculture specific funding necessarily. So, I mean, there's some, but we're excited to be able to supplement that. Some other things that we're working on are partnerships with public facilities, schools, public housing development, senior centers, libraries. We've already done community centers. I didn't list here, but is also a partner of ours. We're thinking about putting raised beds at these places. Daycares we're also starting to explore. So just trying to find places where there's already public space, there's already people there, there's already educational opportunities, or people are living there, and we want to just, see if we can, if there's excitement about growing food or, food production in any way, we want to support that. We also play a role in policy, so I testified in front of the city council around, around the beekeeping ordinance that was recently voted on by them and approved. And so that will expand beekeeping in the city, and we expect other things like that to come along. I already mentioned Office of Food Justice. We're hoping also to work on supporting the thriving of fruit trees, especially like thinking about fruit trees that are currently being, maybe especially on private land, but maybe also on public land where they're not being harvested and they're not being pruned and cared for, and seeing if we can invest in supporting those trees and then eventually maybe expanding fruit trees in the city. We're about to begin conversations more close. We've had some brief conversations, but more strategic conversations with our neighborhood housing development division here at Mayor's Office of Housing to think about integrating food production and housing and how we, what are the steps to do that and how does that make sense? And then lastly, we are, as I mentioned, thinking about how we might increase food production on rooftops and what we can do to make that more possible and invest in that. And I think that's everything.
Great.
So I don't know if I guess we're doing questions later, but if I'll look in the chat. I saw someone wrote something in the chat. Oh, that's not
Yeah,
a
Yeah,
question. Okay.
yeah,
everybody
no,
could,
Sorry, I was just gonna say we can do the questions at the end, I think.
Yeah.
Great. So I guess I'll hand it off to John then.
John, are you?
Donnie, such an awesome, just awesome to hear all the work that Boston as a city is doing. I love that sort of like the approach of between food justice and Grow Boston, putting giving people sort of like instead of just addressing emergency food, like empowering people to grow their own food and putting that in their own hands is such a great approach. I want to put a plug in for some ideas in terms of I work with institutions, and I'm going to talk about Boston Medical Center, but just I think about all the land that institutions have, and something I'm doing in my other world is around I work with hospitals, so encouraging them to consider returning land, so or leasing land for low cost leases to folks to do farming, because we know there's a lot of green lawns out there that are not exactly necessary and are maybe actually harmful. So how can we? So the way that you're sort of going to making efforts to sort of put food production everywhere is awesome. And so thank you. I'm so glad your office exists and you exist. Okay, am I sharing or no? Yeah.
You are. You're
Yep.
sharing. We see
All
your
right, perfect.
full screen.
I don't use PowerPoint that much anymore, so I use Google Slides all the time, so I'm like a little slower here. So thanks everybody. I'm really here to represent Boston Medical Center's good work. So it is my pleasure to do so. I've been working with them for 7, 8 years. They do such great work. But I'll talk a little bit about my history here. So Pete had mentioned, also Shawnee mentioned Article 89. So back in probably 2012, I very idealistically and unrealistically decided to start a rooftop farm, working right away with Recover Green Roofs, back when they were basically a team of two. And I remember meeting with the city early on, and I don't know that they took us that seriously, to be honest. Because we were again, like I said, very unreal, very idealistic, not exactly knowing what this would take. And I think that actually served us well, because had we known everything that it would have taken, we might not have done it. So we just kind of moved forward step by step. I had my 15 minutes of fame here on the right on the Boston Globe once we had the farm built. But we were at this building you see in the left, which is a huge building. I really had a vision that this whole building would be a farm. Maybe someday that will come true, but not under my watch. But so we opened Higher Ground Farm, and it was a farm that was like a traditional farm except on a rooftop, and we were growing food for restaurants and farmers market down at ground level. It was a pleasure. I loved the work. We were in operation for about 4 seasons. We delivered everything to restaurants by bike. So we were really trying to realize this sort of green vision of and be an example of what could be in a city. So all the benefits of green roofs, but actually also growing food, and extremely local food. I never made any money running Higher Ground Farm. And so, that's, I think part of what Shawnee does now is trying to sort of, support economic model and how people can earn living wages from doing this. But, I gained so much out of it beyond money. And so Higher Ground has really, the farm at Boston Design Center is no longer there. They wanted to redo the roof. and I'll spare you all the details there, but we basically have transitioned over to being more of a service provider and a consulting service and work, with Recover on that. Basically, all our work we do is with Recover. So we've done some other consulting on some other farms, on hospitals actually. But I do work, have a contract with Boston Medical Center, so I sort of oversee the operation, and contribute to the vision of it. So I'm going to talk on behalf of BMC, and so the farms really fit into BMC's mission. And they have a vision of making Boston the healthiest urban population in the world. So this is just one of the farms and the program, the overarching program, are just one of the things that Boston Medical Center does. I'll go give you a little overview of some of what they do, but this is the farm, the original farm at 750 Albany Street. There's a second farm, which I will cover, but Shawnee mentioned that it was supported by Grow Boston, or is supported. But you can see here the original farm that we actually that started in 2017, and this was built by Bucket Brigade. There was some infrastructure that went on, but this all came together in about 2 hours with Recover and Higher Ground and some other folks. So a little bit about Boston Medical Center. It is a safety net hospital, meaning that they are serving lower income and folks that traditionally have not received the best services, and they use, this is just a quote I found, sort of a 360-degree model of health, which means health isn't just happening in a doctor's office. They're not just treating disease, but they're really looking at the social determinants of health. And so, and they do this to a great extent. So not only, not only thinking about how perhaps nutrition plays into health, but also taking an active role in the community. So providing financial and legal support to patients, might be getting their power shut off, or getting kicked out of their apartments. Their purchases reflect sort of a broader vision of healthcare's role in health. So purchasing local food, which helps local economy. People can sort of get the connection between having a healthy economy and health. Purchasing sustainably produced goods and going to great lengths to purchase products of all sorts that would be in line with sustainability goals, and then a number of different food access initiatives that coincide with their farming work. They are recognizing that health and environment are not they're one and the same, so you can't separate them. Having a health, climate change, we know the health ramifications of climate change. So recognizing that food, that health and climate, or that health and the environment are synonymous. So they are active in, they're a member of Practice Green Health, which is a organization that supports healthcare and sustainability. Part of the Boston Green Ribbon Commission. They have climate commitments like Race to Zero, and then have a cogen plant on the roof that would function in the event of a flood, or if there's issues with the grid. But the farms are part of a program they call Nourishing Our Communities. So it's a 3-part program that involves their on-site food pantry, their teaching kitchen, and the farms. And so I'll go through those three briefly. So first off, talking about the farms. So the original farm at 750 Albany, as I mentioned, opened in 2017. We're entering our 8th season there. It's about a 8,000 square foot roof of 3 stories high, and there's about 2,200 square feet of growing space. This farm generates around 5,000 pounds of food annually. We grow all the things that most farms grow. We do prioritize. I won't get into too much of the strategy, but I will say because it's a small space and Boston doesn't have the longest growing season in the world, we're really prioritizing things that have a high turnover so that we can sort of like we're not growing Brussels sprouts that you plant once and harvest once. You're growing things that that you can harvest multiple times. Another consideration is the community that it serves and the markets that it's going to. So by markets, I mean, where the produce is going. I'll talk a little bit more about the food pantry, but the 3 main places the produce goes would be their on-site food pantry. There's a farmers market once a week that's basically a subsidized farmers market. So think, buying everything's $1, so not market rates. And then some is used for the teaching kitchen, which I'll mention a little bit more about. And then food services. So a small amount will go to the hospital's food service. But there are particular ethnic communities in Boston that might be accessing the food pantry or coming through the hospital. So we talk with the teaching kitchen. We talk with we communicate around to decide what crops should we grow, what new things. So like callaloo, there's a big Caribbean population in Boston. So growing things that folks recognize and would know how to cook with. There's also beehives on that site. This site uses the RAM system, which is a milk crate growing system. It's branded by Recover as RAM. It's like Recover Aerated Mobile. I forget the exact what the acronym stands for. But it is a branded Recover growing system that's basically a milk crate with an agricultural fabric inside, and that has its pluses and minuses. And folks, if I won't go into it, but if people have questions, let me know. This building is in the heart of the BMC campus, so it's really nice. People walking by in the buildings can see it from above. And then there's also there's a farm cam on the farm, so people can see in the cafeteria as well. As equally important to what's grown is really the way that these farms reach the community. So there's all sorts of education that happens on the farm. This is the farms partner internally and externally. So there's a refugee center inside Boston Medical Center that the farm partners with to bring refugees up to have volunteer days. The farm partners with volunteer services to bring sort of having team building activities for different departments in the hospital. They partner with like clinical, so outpatient programs. There's a partnership, a deep partnership with the teaching kitchen, which does work with Boston Public Schools. So that's an internal and external partnership. We're hosting camps for children to come up, work on the farm, harvest, and then go down and cook and learn to cook. So there's yoga classes. There's all sorts of ways that this farm interacts with the BMC community and then the outside community as well. There's been a long-term partnership with the Urban Farming Institute. They train adults in farming. And so they'll bring folks up to BMC Farm to have that rooftop farm experience. So all sorts of ways that the farm partners with communities, with community organizations and internal departments in the hospital to do more than just grow, but to teach other folks to grow at home and cook, etc. There's also a connection between the food pantry, so that food that goes down to the food pantry, there'll be cooking classes, from the farm. There'll be cooking classes in the teaching kitchen to help folks use those foods. So it's a very sort of, like circular system, all connected. Just a shot of some of what's grown on the farm: flowers, peppers, tomatoes, all sorts of things. And then we've got a new farm coming this season. I believe they're laying irrigation today as we speak. And so you can see this is a different growing system. This was the farm supported by Grow Boston. So this is a larger farm with a different system. So instead of the milk crate system, these are large raised beds. This is on a building on Mass Ave that BMC somewhat recently bought and remodeled or rehabbed. And it's an office building for BMC with a retail food space, and opportunities for connection with that retail food space. As we're opening, we're sort of figuring out all the different connections that it can make. Here's another shot of it. It was covered with tarps this year because over the winter, because we couldn't plant in it. Because as everyone knows, these projects always take longer than you think. So we were protecting the soil from, just rain and nutrient loss. So a little bit more about this farm. The beds, the milk crates are, 12 by 12 foot or 12 inches cubed. And so there's about 10 inches of soil. This has greater soil depth, about 14 or 12 to 14 inches, and depending on where you are. There is you can't see it here, but there's a solar pergola, which serves as a shading area over by where you see the folks in green back in the back. So there's an education and a processing area there. But the all of 960 has a solar array on it, and BMC has introduced this pilot program to prescription solar. So their patients that are low income and are struggling to pay their utility bills essentially can receive a subsidy towards their power bill from this solar array. So just another example of the way that BMC is kind of combining environmental work and social determinants of health. There'll be a native plant meadow with beehives as well. Great irrigation system. And with this farm, now that we have two farms, there's all sorts of new, and this is sort of a newer neighborhood. It's still in the same neighborhood of BMC, just a little bit of a different area. So now we're looking at all sorts of new partnerships, because the food for what will be grown at this farm doesn't necessarily have a destination. We have lots of ideas, but that means we've got lots of opportunities for community partnerships. So how can we bring what's grown here out to the community in a greater way? So a little bit about the food pantry. I already mentioned this, that farm produce comes to the food pantry. It's awesome because it means it's organic, fresh food coming to the food pantry. The way this works is that patients are screened for food insecurity. If they are found to be food insecure, they can be prescribed a visit to the food pantry. And I mentioned that's connected to sort of cooking classes as well, at the teaching kitchen, which is here. So they're offering all sorts of different classes that are connected to the farm and for youth and adults. It's a great service, and it's right in the hospital's main cafeteria, sort of glassed off, so you can observe outside. We did a honey harvest there a couple years ago. And I just end with a couple stats from 2023. So you can see this past year, 4,000 pounds of produce, most of it going to the food pantry, or about half of it going to the food pantry, other half going to the farmers market, and some amount going to the kitchen. Because the kitchens in the hospital serve so many people, it's hard to make a dent. So we really narrow in on something like greens, where they can be featured on the salad bar, and grow a quantity that makes sense for the kitchen. But most of the produce goes to to people sort of in need. 34 pounds of honey harvested last year. We'll be at least doubling that this year. And then you can see here visitors to the farm, so classes, tours. There we do some online classes as well, especially during the off season, so November, February, March. And then lots of different volunteer groups. So over 1,300 visits to the farm. I think that's my last slide. Yeah. So thanks, everybody. Hope I didn't go too long.
Oh, thank you, John, and thank you, Shawnee. Both really inspiring. And I think we can open the floor up to some Q&As, and I was maybe thinking about a good place to start, which is a question that I would like to just sort of pose maybe to you, Shawnee. Is coming out of the BSA, heavily focused on sort of the design community, what's the sort of work that we can do as a broader design and sort of construction industry to support the work that you're doing at Grow Boston? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but would love to hear some thoughts about that, or thinking about just sort of the broader work that we can all do to support what's going on at Grow Boston.
Man, I wish you'd asked me before. I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, mostly because I
Sorry.
don't know. I haven't ever thought about like how people in your field could support our work. I guess, I mean, it's always helpful to have our work promoted. But I don't know. I don't have like a BSA specific answer for that. Maybe I can like mull on it and think about it for a minute and get back to you.
Sounds good.
Well, I would make a suggestion for
Great.
how you could help us help you.
Great.
And it's like we could inform our clients about what you do, and understanding your cycle of grants, and when you're trying to find certain groups, if they're people that we're working with, we can kind of nudge them into your direction.
Well, and that does maybe, oh, go ahead. You go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I think, we do a lot of schools, and so there's that school aspect to it.
Yeah.
Schools aren't always ideal for this. They're good for certain aspects of it. We like the aspect of some of this being on the roof for ease of use for students and faculty during a school day, and they don't necessarily have to go down at grade and out of the school to access this kind of stuff. But there are other logistical issues with schools. But I think us knowing your cycle of when you're trying to find people so we can get folks in the queue. Some of our projects are long. There may be other folks dealing with projects that are very short term, and timing is really what it's about a lot of the time.
Yeah, well, I think that projects that would be like either rooftop growing or other ways that like food production is integrated into the design of a space, those are mostly projects that don't have a very specific timeline or regular timeline. So I do think while you're talking, I did think of two things. One is that any ideas about any clients you're working with or folks you know who might be interested in rooftop growing in particular, we would like to hear about, and be put in touch with, to explore those possibilities. Even though, even if we lock in a new, our second rooftop farm with this particular funding source in the next few months, like I said, we are anticipating exploring this more. I'm also personally interested in vertical growing, and I don't know enough about, like, I think there's some big downsides, or just in terms of maintenance, that I still am not sure yet if it's something we should be investing a lot of our um time in these stages of Grow Boston, but I am very curious about it, and I'm curious about um like I know that there are sort of, what is the word I'm looking for? I guess designs of that kind of design that um is external to a building, like would attach to a building or something. But I wonder if there are ways that, like, and maybe this is just a point of, like, if any of you are interested in this as well, like, educating us about it would be really helpful. Like, if there are ways of designing buildings that would include food production that is vertical as opposed to, like, on the roof. So that's an area of exploration we're interested in. And I know there's at least one housing project that's come through the Neighborhood Housing Development Division that is interested in exploring that as well. Um, I think those are the two things that I was thinking of. But yeah, we're definitely excited for new possibilities. So I think anytime you all come across, oh, here's this fun way someone's incorporating food production into a design, we would want to know about that. Or if you see something that's more about not food production, but some other kind of open space, or landscaping that could be that where the design elements could be applied to food production. That would be cool to hear about, and even just like sending examples. So those are a couple of things that do come to mind. And I just want to say before I forget, because we don't have a lot of time, that in the spirit of, people educating people, in addition to Pete, who gave me a real education, a couple of years ago when he started getting involved with Grow Boston, I also wanted to shout out John, because John was my very first rooftop growing tutor and came to 26 Court Street when I knew absolutely nothing. So I meant to mention that earlier and I forgot. But we're always eager to be, like, told about innovations and understand those better.
Thanks, Shawnee. Does anybody have any questions? And I think we could go about this through the chat, but also through just folks shouting out and get involved in the voice conversation as well. If you want to just speak up, if anybody has any questions to ask Shawnee or John.
Yeah, I think you can raise your hand too if you want to on the Zoom tools. I want to mention one thing to Shawnee relative to some ideas. One of our previous presentations was about vertical facade vegetation, which wasn't geared towards farming per se, but it was what they're doing in Germany and requiring it on a lot of their buildings. So there are people out there doing this stuff. So I think this group can try to help make those connections and revisit some of the topics again. Just because we've talked about it once, I think we'd probably bring it up again. I'd like to ask John a question, if I can. I'd like to know how he went. I don't know if he ever farmed on the ground or if he's always just like jumped right to roofs.
So I gardened growing up and gardened. I had a partner that was a farmer. In all sorts of different farms, actually in Massachusetts. I think she worked for the Food Project. I think she worked with the Food Project out in Lincoln. I think they have a farm there. So yes, no, I had not really commercially farmed, but she did. And so I learned a lot from her. I do not consider myself sort of an expert in farming. I had like 4 years of experience. And so the people that are doing the farming, like at BMC, we just hired a new farm manager and she's got years of experience. It's a lifelong, like many things are, a lifelong learning. But no, yeah. So I'm just an advocate. I'm not sure what I am. Stupid enough to do crazy projects. something like that.
Cool. Does anyone else have a question?
I have a question for Shawnee. I'm Anna Berry Carmer. I'm at the City of Chelsea and I'm in our Housing and Community Development Department. And we actually, it was really exciting to kind of see what is going on at Grow Boston because we are just sort of building up. We have a lot of active community organizations interested in urban agriculture, one small farm, and a lot of folks who are really at the intersection of the food security and agriculture. And one thing that I'm working on right now is a project with our senior center to actually try and do, so right now there's a little patio with a growing space on the roof of the senior center. And we're looking to sort of build that out into like a little bit more of a active growing space, more of a garden, I would say, than a farm. And then also combine it with like a passive green roof. But I have been trying to connect with other municipalities just because a lot of the private companies doing this, just there's different procurement rules and things that I'm navigating as part of this process. So I don't know, it probably is better offline conversation with like details, but it was really exciting to hear the way that you all are navigating this. And I would love to chat with you about that project.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Sounds
Cool.
good. In case anyone didn't see, I put my email in the chat.
Thank you. Any more questions? I'll ask another one then. Unless Pete, you got one?
I was just gonna kind of round it off with a few words on green roofs and farms and
Okay. Well,
but-
one quick question for John, then you can round it up. I'm curious about the fruit tree on the roof. Is it just one tree? Is it on the roof? Is it on the ground? And
I think we're gonna.
Why-
I think it's gonna be a peach tree, and that would be the first rooftop tree that I have seen. Pete probably has more examples of it, but we're gonna have a sort of a native plant meadow area with a tree. Pete, you want to comment on that?
Sure. Yeah, this is a really exciting addition to this new rooftop farm, and I think it also ties in a lot of sort of the goals around green roofs and green infrastructure that we're all pushing here. And fruit trees, as you all could imagine, are pretty challenging to grow on roofs. And one of the biggest limitations is soil depths and the weight capacity that is required to grow trees on a roof. The deeper the soil profile on a roof, the heavier it is, and therefore the more robust the building must be. As designers, we understand that. And so it can be challenging to find roofs that can withstand or have that load capacity for trees. But there's some really, really exciting examples of trees on roofs for food production. And in our region, probably the most known is Brooklyn Grange's roof at the Javits Center, which is the big New York Convention Center. And that has a huge hundreds of thousands of square feet of green roof, or 100,000+. And they also have I think 160,000 square foot rooftop farm, which has a huge rooftop orchard area that grows apples, peaches, maybe some pawpaws, mushrooms, etc. And it's a really great place to visit if you ever get a chance in your New York City. They do tours. But this new BMC will be sort of a smaller version of that, where we're really trying to encourage and approach this rooftop farming through the lens of sort of a permaculture approach. So we have this native area where there's a pollinator area geared towards the insects, a fruit tree that will require sort of a very different approach to farming, and then also a bees in this area that can really thrive off this small pollinator area, and then of course move off and enjoy the city around them. So for us, it's a really sort of exciting addition, and the BMC farm will be hosting some opening parties throughout the summer, or throughout the spring and summer, and not sure how the tours will be this year and sort of getting up and running, but I hope that everybody can get a chance to visit that site once things are finished with construction and sort of up and running, because it's going to be really, really cool site. And we have 1 minute, and so maybe Gary or Eric, do you want to round it off with some BMs or some BM? Sorry, where are we? The Boston Society of
BSA,
Architects
yeah.
acronym, BSA.
Well,
info.
I wanted to thank the speakers again for joining us. I wanted to thank everyone else for showing up. The next session will be May 9th. So I think if you registered for this, you should get a notification in the future for that one. But if you don't, if it goes into your spam or whatever, visit the website every once in a while for the next one that you can sign up for. And if you've got ideas for things you want us to try to look at or get speakers to discuss, send us emails. Our emails are on that website as well. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, Erik.
No, Gary, I didn't have anything for today. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we appreciate everyone showing up. So it's great. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Sean. Thanks, John.
Thanks, everybody.
You're
Nice
welcome.
to see
Thanks
you
for
all.
having me.
Thank you.